So, hi everybody, this is Sasa Hub. I'm Giacomo, and today we are with a special guest. He is Saul from the YouTube channel Life of Saul. He talks about mainly investment banking because it's his background. So, Saul, please tell us a bit what you do and why did you decide to start your own channel?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you and finally getting me on my channel. I'm glad to be here. So I'm Saul, also known as Life of Saul, and I coin myself the bodybuilding banker. And for me, in terms of your first question, why I started YouTube, I think it was mainly because I was always someone who created content from a very, very early age, whether it was just using, social media platforms such as Snapchat. And I'll show snippets of my life, and there was just a genuine interest for my peers, in the sports teams, in the different societies on my course. And I think for me, the main question was how I balance an intense job investment banking that is with fitness. And so what I tried to do is, rather than individually answering questions, I decided to put this on a platform and really show it can be possible, although it's very, very difficult, as you would know, managing to get this interview with me. However, it's something I really enjoy, and I'm thrived, and it's growing, and I'm really happy.
Okay. So let's tell us a bit about your background and what motivated you to get into investment banking in a specific.
Sure. So a bit of my background, I studied a non-traditional degree. I'll take you back to the start. So I have been born and bred in the UK, and I grew up in inner city London, somewhere called South London. So in the more kind of, I'd guess, urban, poverty-stricken areas in the UK. My parents kind of migrated from abroad. And I think it was just the case of, they wanted for me to do the best for myself. And so this was for a number of degrees. You know how parents can be, doctor, lawyer, and banker never came into the frame. However, I guess for me, it was more, I became fascinated about what people done in the city. I think one time I went I did a work experience, and I went to the city, saw people carrying briefcases, suitcases, people that looked really, really important. And I didn't know at the time, but I think that element of being in the center of something very, very important, a high profile project, is something I wanted to do. And so I decided to, just do some interest. And I think as I went on in my journey and I got to my university, again, I went to a target 6 and I found out more. I just asked the right questions. I networked with the people. And I basically created a path of how do I get from A to B. And through that, it came experience, spring weeks, and all of that, which we'll touch on later.
Okay. So one question that I have, was it easier for you or harder since you didn't come from a background like accounting or economics? Did you have a plus or a minus when it came to recruiting?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. Listen, if I was going to be honest, I'd say both. And the reason why I say both is on one side, it was more difficult because a lot of the stuff meant that I had to do independent learning. However, that's somewhat, my personality prefers that. I prefer kind of the independent learning. So I had to do a lot on the technicals. So whether it's learning the accounting, learning the M&A deal process, learning how to, the technical side, whether it's the financial modeling, the various different valuation methods, comparable comps, and just learn about the overall process. I found it was fun and a challenge, and I guess it shaped how I am today because I had to do it outside my degree, which was heavily, very, very intense. I enjoy that stuff, and I guess that made it more challenging. But I guess it was easier because, when I did my spring weeks, you had the target 6, and you're aware of the target 6, right? So the top 5 or 6 unis you regard in the UK, and majority of people studied economics or finance or, some sort of related degree. And so, as good as these guys are, how do you differentiate them? So I think my angle was always, I studied this degree and it gives me a diversity of thought, and that diversity of thought can be really, really useful in, just shaping how I am and helping me kind of go forward. So I think it played a role in that sense.
Okay. So when it came to getting recruited, did you have an advantage since you have been through spring weeks or summer internships? Is it something that will give you a big advantage or not?
100%. I'd say the earlier you get into the recruiting cycle, the better, just because the competition is less. So just to give an overview of the process, you have so the first stage of entry generally, although some people get quite lucky and get on pre-university internships, is really spring weeks. And what this is designed to do is give you an insight into, say, for your front office, whether you want to go to markets or investment banking, what it entails to meet different people, and normally done in the first year of a 3-year course or the second year of a 4-year course. Now, they're quite competitive to get onto. It's almost very similar to the summer process, but I guess you have less people to compete, or sometimes even more, because springs they can't take on everyone. I'd say the main thing is you're only there for a week, so yeah, I think it really helped me just in terms of get used to the process. So I remember going to university, and I remember just sending out hundreds of cover letters, going to every networking event, learning, getting random phone calls when you're out with your friends, saying, "Hey, is this?" and they say your name, and sometimes they'll surprise you. But that element, it was fantastic. It was something that really shaped and sharpened my experience at university. So I'd say that's the easiest process. The next year, the aim of it, and which I did, is you do that and then you convert to a summer. So after this week, after you impress people, generally you have interviews after. They see how much you've learned. They see if they like you. And although technicals are very, very important, I think if you're someone willing to learn, which I was, someone who may not have known much at the start, but has shown phenomenal growth, they think to themselves, if you can learn this much in a week, how much you do in a year, how much you do in a number of years. You see what I mean? So that's a natural progression. And then of course it's full-time. Now full-time is incredibly difficult, particularly if you haven't got experience. So I'd advise most people to try for the spring, but I'd say most people go for summers. A lot more difficult, but generally if you do get a summer without doing a spring, it means you're well prepared or you have some form of experience. So yeah, I'd say those are the two angles to go.
Okay. Can you go a bit more in detail about the recruitment process, how that works? Usually, if there's a big difference between larger banks and more boutique banks,
Sure.
and do they value extracurriculars or not?
That's a good question. So in terms of the recruitment process, yeah, I'll give you I'd say with the bulge bracket or larger banks, I think they're quite very, very similar. What they tend to do is initially you'd have an application. So the best things to do on a rolling basis. So people get that confused. What that really means is they recruit as soon as they get applications. So maybe they might have set dates to review. So they open in August, they might have a September date to review. And even though it says open to December, the way it's set out, because they have to have assessment days, which they invite you to, by that time, they might have already recruited 75% of their class. So bulge brackets tend to have the application. You'd apply with either your CV or covering letter. You'd be invited to do automated numerical or some form of psychometric test, which is just the way that they kind of, I guess, lessen the class because there's so many people applying. And then after that, you get a number of different things. You can get, I think in most cases for a spring, you'll get phone call interviews. So these tend to be generic, no, not generic, should I say. They're questions, motivational questions if it's at a spring level, based on why you want to enter banking, understand your story, understand your CV, look at your strengths and weaknesses. And then of course, technicals and news surrounding the bank. I think with boutique culture, what I find generally from my experience was they tend to be a lot more technical. I think they focus on a smaller number of candidates and generally boutique. So the idea is it doesn't have the same conflict of interest at a large bulge bracket bank because they focus purely on advisory, as opposed to a large bulge bracket bank. They might provide both advisory and financing. Boutique purely focuses on that. And so their USP is that they're very good at that advisory part. So I think they tend to focus on the technicals a lot more, and they tend to maybe look at certain behavioral elements, but it varies from bank to bank. In terms of extracurricular, I do think it adds value. I think everyone has good grades, everyone is going to a good school. I think the extracurriculars definitely show you them, just generates interest as a good talking point, and it shows you can do a lot more besides, get the 2-1 first class and get your, A stars. They want someone who is, sociable, because like you say, you spend so many hours with people. It's good to know that there's stuff you can do outside of work.
Yeah, understandable. It's very important to be able to build relations along being very technical, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was trying to figure out is, for example, many people in the Big Four or in asset management have their own certifications, like the chartered accountant or the CFA. Is there something similar that will stand out in investment banking particularly, or not?
Good question. I think it varies on your employer. I think the CFA is something that I have seen, but if you do get an investment banking quite early, when I say early, out of undergraduate, there's no need. You learn enough technicals and you do it. People do it, I guess, for accreditation, but it's not a must. I'd say if you're coming from a different industry, then the CFA is quite important. So I have a friend who recently made the move from asset management to investment banking. Now, the CFA, alongside his 3 years in asset management, provided evidence of experience and commitment to finance and understanding the finance principles. However, if you are coming straight out of university, generally it's fine. You don't have to do a CFA, although it's always encouraged if you can. What tends to happen is if you're at a good place and you're constantly learning, your concepts of finance will improve anyway. And secondly, you do get tested. In order to be regulated, you do have to pass some corporate finance and regulatory tests before you start your job.
Okay. Another question that I have, is it more common to see people getting into investment banking right out with just a bachelor, or do they have a master's? And most of the time, do they start out in investment banking, or they have previous experiences?
So yeah, it varies. If I'm being completely honest, so what I tend to find is so I'm a UK student. What I mean by UK is I attend a UK institution. With the UK institution, what tends to happen is you normally have 1 degree. So 1 degree is undergraduate. Although you do see UK people going to masters to strengthen their technicals, but that's normally on a case if they haven't got in through their first year, the second year or final year by university. They normally use it as an extension ladder to get into finance. However, with European, the non-UK, let's just put in that category, they are more likely to have a master's because I think their education system facilitates for it. They also tend to have a lot more experience because that is part of their degree. So their degree in Germany, I had a very good friend who's absolutely done fantastic. Goldman Sachs now in one of the top private equity funds. And, he had already garnered, by the time he'd done the summer internship, he had garnered nearly 2 years of experience. So he was so far ahead of the curve where, a guy from Oxford, as smart as they are, the Goldman is their first ever, their first ever internship. So I would say it's more common to see with the non-UK candidates that have that sort of experience, but there are a lot of UK candidates that do masters. So I'd say, listen, if you can get in first time and save yourself money and time, because experience is the best teacher. And even if you get these many masters, just being there, being diligent and growing exponentially will be the best for you. I would say generally UK, it's fine to have not many masters as long as you make sure you get in. But over time, we do tend to see a lot of people, especially the later they get in, the more likely they are to have a master's and additional experience.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit more, after you got hired, what are the skills that you improved the most on the job, both technical and soft skills?
So I'll start on the technical skills. Naturally, my understanding of business improved vastly. I think just generally, just being able to deliver is probably the most important thing. You get taught something once or a couple of times, and yeah, you're supposed to deliver to high quality. So of course, naturally, my Excel improved just because efficiency is important. So you know, very rarely would you use the mouse if you want to be quick, right? So there's just shortcuts that you naturally pick up, and it's not something that you pre-learn. It's just to make your life easier. So if you wanted to build, there's just functions, simple functions, never have to be too crazy. But Excel is a very powerful tool that I would advise if you can do a bit of Excel work before coming in. It's important because a lot of the work is split into financial modeling, but also a part of it is just data analysis. So let's say if you want to create a market slide, for example, and you're showing your client this is how the market is growing, and you get some external data from, say, I don't know, you can get some external data from CapIQ, FactSet, Bloomberg. You have all these data points, but you're trying to show one column. To do anything manual it's not possible. However, using an index match, which is a function I think is used across all types of industries, not just investment bankers, is part, or SUMIF, but of course you can get a lot more complex than that. I'm just bringing them to the front. So I think it's very important. And those are the skills that improve. In terms of PowerPoint, of course, aesthetics, making sure things are aligned. You now, I guess the biggest difference was when I was, after about a year or so, when I'll do some stuff outside banking and someone will send me something. I was helping someone do a website, and I just said, just things I noticed. I was like, okay, this is out of line. You need to put this to the left. It just, you become almost a perfectionist because everything has to be client ready. So one of my seniors, the best way he said is, if you produce a bit of work, are you ready to give to the client tomorrow? Or now, as a finished article? So I'd say on the technical side, Excel, PowerPoint, financial modeling, understanding of accounting as well, and just company fundamentals and business, and being able to tell a story. On the softer side, I'd say for me, I was always a good communicator, I would say, but I'd say now having to organize my thoughts in a more logical manner. So, rather than just saying a bunch of words, sometimes I still do, no one's perfect, but being able to organize your thoughts in a way that is very succinct and easy for someone to understand. So an interview process, of course, you're improving them, but when you're explaining stuff to the client, it can be complex, but it's all about breaking it down to a level that is very attainable. And I'd say that's a big thing. Attention to detail as well is very, very important. Perseverance, being able to deal with little sleep, personal frustrations, being able to just focus on what's the most important. So there's a lot to be garnered, and I guess, learn.
Okay. So another thing relating to the day-to-day tasks that you do, do you get? Is it more common to get involved in M&A process, IPOs? What else? What are the kind of deals that you get more frequently involved in?
I would say it varies a lot on the team you're in. So, for example, in a healthcare team, a lot of the healthcare is, split into, I'd say, medical technology. You've got pharmaceuticals, and you've got biotech, and I think a lot of biotech. So you look at like the vaccine, right? You have a lot of these small, especially in the US, healthcare is very regulated, and you have a lot of these small upcoming companies in Silicon Valley, which are nascent. That just means they're loss making, and so their value is derived from future value. Do you know what I mean? So the valuation is more future value. So if they were going to IPO or go to market, so what I'm essentially trying to say is your team, that the team and the type of work you do focuses on, then predicates what type of deals you're going to work on. But so a team like healthcare, you do IPOs, you do capital raises as well. You do M&A. Of course, product teams are there to do the different products. So ECM team will do the ECM, so they'll do the IPOs. DCM will do the debt raising. Leverage finance will do leverage finance deals, and so on. I've been fortunate in the sense that I've had probably M&A experience. I've had buy side and sell side. I have done a little bit of IPO work. I want to say so much on the capital raising side. And just to go into detail, all of this is really just learn about the client, breaking down things into very succinct steps. So creating PowerPoint presentations to show the pictures of what we're trying to produce, breaking down, doing detailed financial analysis in the Excel. A lot of the other softer skills is just managing processes, speaking to lawyers, speaking to accountants, speaking to consultants, calls, managing people, speaking to CEOs, CFOs. So those are a lot of things you do get to pick up when you learn in banking.
Okay. So another thing about the culture, do you have sort of like pros and cons of being in a large bank compared to a boutique bank? And what are the pros and cons of being in a large bank and being in a boutique?
Sure. I'd say I'll start with the pros. So the pros for being in a large bank really I'd say just a brand name. I think if you were especially the top three, top two Americans, what tends to happen is your brand name is very good. Of course, it's important for you to execute and do good work and you can learn from them. I say the brand name holds you in good stead because a lot of people, obviously, there's a high attrition rate in banking because it's not mainly the most sustainable thing. So I'd say the brand name, the number of deals you work on. The reason being is because the larger banks tend to have the bigger name clients. And so if you're working with the bigger name clients, again, that level of reputation definitely holds you in good stead going forward. You tend to work with really smart people. Again, a lot of people naturally want to gravitate to the larger banks. So you get that network. And you do learn because they have the resources, they have the potential, they can train you. That's really, really good. In terms of the cons, depends on your team really. If your team is really big, a lot of the work can be shared. You're not getting as much responsibility, not as much autonomy. Your exposure to clients is not as much because it's limited to calls. So it's all great working on a really big, high-profile deal, but if you are just calling, listening to the call and taking notes, that's not the same as being in the room. And even if you're a smaller deal, being in the room face to face with a client, do you know what I mean? So I think that element is a bit of a con. And it varies by the bank. If the bank doesn't necessarily get exposure, and also on you as well, if you don't get a lot of, how do I pronounce it? If you personally don't have a good experience at a larger bank, you can just be kind of in a mist and you might not get as much exposure. Now with the boutiques, the pros tend to be, if it's a good boutique, you definitely get, you tend to get financially compensated, although like the bulge brackets have improved their compensation. Boutiques traditionally, if you're a good boutique, you do get well compensated. You, in some cases, become a better banker. And the reason being is because it's just smaller deal teams, leaner deal teams. So what that means that you're not working with so many people. So you get to see all facets of the deal. You get to see deals from start to finish because it's not necessarily always the case, but dealing with smaller deals, you get to the life cycle of deal, whereas at big bank, you might just be at the tail end. You get to see more complex deals because bigger public deals tend to be quite easier. What I mean is public deals, all the information is available, it's quite vanilla. Private deals or take private or just different deals require different sets of valuation and it's not as easy to get a hold of the information. You learn some of the softer skills, which I mentioned, which would be just managing people, speaking to lawyers and accountants, dealing with documents like the SBA, for example, drafting the IM, the teaser, the management presentation. I think you get a lot more ownership at a boutique. Now, say on the cons, I guess it would just be the pros of the bulge brackets. So the cons maybe might be you might not work, depending on the boutique, you might not work with the biggest clients. You might do the same sort of job. So although you're working on complex M&A transactions, you might not get to kind of work on the IPOs because obviously, boutique focus just mainly on M&A. So yeah.
Okay. So, can you tell us a bit about what investment banks look for when it comes to promotions? Is it something like, do they value more soft skills like building relations with the clients and so on, or is it something more like technical?
It honestly varies. It's a combination of both, and it's where you sit in the team. So I've been in an experience where someone kind of got quite far. He wasn't the most technical, but he had a background in the team, and he was very good. He was kind of mid-level, making his way in senior, and I think at the junior level, technicals are the most important because they're not putting you in front of clients. I think at the junior, senior level, it's all about your client exposure and how well. Now, yeah, I'd probably say it's that, and he got quite far because he knew enough technicals, but I'd say his ability mainly lied on ability to talk, and he was a lot more gifted than the others, and so was able to stand out. So I'd say it depends on the other strengths of your team. It's all about complementing your team, really. But as an analyst, I think get the technicals right, get the basics right, understand Excel, PowerPoint. You don't have to be a crazy whiz, but if you're trusted, you have a good grasp on finance. After 3 years, you'll learn, and then yeah, you can focus on the more interesting part later on.
Okay. So, another question that I have that is a bit more technical is, I hear a lot of people in investment banking that prefer Standard and Poor's Capital IQ rather than Bloomberg. Can you tell us a bit more why is that, and what are the pros that you see in Cap IQ that you don't see on the terminal?
So like I said, I've only used the terminal doing one of my internships. I think the terminal is generally for market data. So it might be useful for someone in markets, global market securities, for example. I'm in M&A. I'd say Bloomberg terminals taking a step back logically, they're a lot more expensive and they're shared. So just by logic, if I'm going to use it, it might be shared between 10 people, 20 people. These are in a couple of, I think it's 5 figures. So that would be quite frustrating because you want to get information quite quick. Although I know it's more accurate, in terms of efficiency, I think Capital IQ, which I've used the most experience, is just better because, it's tried and tested and it can pull up, the information you need. And generally, it's more intuitive and easy to use. Bloomberg, you have to learn a lot of functions as well. And if you don't use it as regularly, you're going to struggle. Whereas I guess Capital IQ is something that is used so often, whether it's through pulling out comp tables. Capital IQ functions are important and it's really, really easy to do. And it embeds well with Excel as well. So your outputs look really neat as opposed to just going to a terminal, sending an email, really efficient with the information and then working on it.
Okay. Another thing, going back to the boutique versus large banks, are there big differences in the salary structure? Something like, do you get something like stock options in the larger banks that you don't get in the boutiques, or how does that work?
I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable in going too much in detail. I'll just go and say as much as the stock options generally come into play and the more senior you are. So I think from associate onwards, you have the option of your payments being deferred. So obviously as you go up the ladder, it becomes a lot more lucrative. So if you're getting a bonus as an associate, maybe free or a VP, rather than getting one large payment, it's common that they defer the payments for a number of years to incentivize you as a person to remain at the firm. Because if you just got, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number at the sky, but 200K as a bonus all at once, if you leave and decide not to work, that's 50K over 4 years. Of course, your lifestyle and expenses would have changed, but what I'm trying to say is that they're smart in incentivizing you to stay longer. I think at the elite boutiques, It varies. They all change, and depends on the team's performance. Traditionally, at the elite boutiques, they used to pay more. So I'm talking about the Centerviews, for example, the Lazards as well. However, now I think, given what happened with, I think the bulge brackets kind of restated their pay and now pay more. So I couldn't go beyond that.
Okay, understandable. So you talked about people that might want to leave. Can you tell us a bit more about the popular exit opportunities for people in investment banking? And yeah, give us a bit of an outlook on what are the various possibilities.
Okay, sure. So most people traditionally go to the buy side. It's going to be anything from private equity to hedge funds. So what this is mainly doing is you're going from more a transactional structure, a structure where you're kind of helping to sell companies on the kind of on that side to the buy side. So the buy side essentially is you're a buyer. So you're looking at different facets of the company. So in most cases in M&A, if you work on a sell side, you're helping to sell a company. So you look at a company and you say they are very good in all these facets, and this is why we are looking to sell. You basically, it's a market. It's very easy to market a company you're trying to sell. You know, he's trying to sell a car, right? You say it's great, it's this, it's that. When you're trying to buy it, you look at it with a lot more skepticism. And I think in the buy side of private equity is the same thing. You are buying companies, you're taking ownership. So there's a lot more of a consultant's eye. There's a lot of technical analysis, but there's also looking at key revenue streams. Is the market right? You ask a lot of questions. You are a lot more specific in your analysis. And those are one of the routes. It tends to be quite lucrative if you join quite early relative to banking. So people tend to recruit for private equity maybe after 2 years of an investment banking, because you've been trained, you learn, and it's a good time, especially if you go to the top P houses. It's generally the best, and it's quite an interesting role. In terms of other exit opportunities, people do a range of things. People go to corporate development. So this is more in-house or a startup as a manager. And what you're doing here is you're doing internal M&A. So looking at essentially the same thing, opportunities for companies to grow from a strategic sense, but using your M&A experience to say, okay, I'm working from Amazon. They could buy these ton of warehouses because it means that they can even be faster than they already are, which eliminate the competition. So you look at how that's done, or you can go to like a real estate fund and say, okay, if you acquire this property and you charge this per square foot and you have this rental rate, this is how much you can make. So there's different opportunities people do. People, you know, those are the most opportunities they go into. And there's also quirky, unique ones. I always say my favorite is Ed Woodward, a Manchester United fan. He was a banker at JP Morgan. During the time the Glazer family, which is an American family, overtook United, I think back in 2005 and 6. He now is CEO of Manchester United, which I think is a fantastic job. One with a lot of scrutiny, but I think that is a fantastic jump, like from a JPM banker to arguably one of the most powerful men at probably the biggest club, arguably, in the world. So yeah.
Yeah. That should be nice to hang around the best players in the world. Okay, one last thing that I want to ask you is your tips for work-life balance in investment banking, because everybody knows about the reports of investment bankers struggling, doing 100-hour weeks and so on. Do you have any tips that you can share that help you out in your work-life balance?
Sure. I think planning is the first thing. I think being able to organize your time. So what I try to do is just not go into the week blinded. I try to say, okay, these are my certain goals or what I want to achieve. So I have stuff outside banking I like to do, one namely YouTube. And so if you kind of plan, you tend to think, you're able to think more about how you can, just withdraw happiness and achieve certain things outside your job. So I'd say that. I'd say also be cognizant of the teams you're going into. Investment banking is hard working, but don't make it harder than you need to. If you like a team, That's fantastic. But look at the hours. A lot of people come in and hours the same. It's like hours, easy. It gets to you. It gets to you. So I'd say be very cognizant of your choice and just be vocal. If you're someone who, because people say, initially when I first started, I didn't want to go to the gym. I thought, oh, I don't want to be seen not on my desk, I'm busy working. But if that makes me be more efficient and brings more happiness in a job that effectively can affect your mood and your morale because you're getting less sleep, what is the value of that? And just, I think, prioritizing and putting value on things that make you happy ultimately, because it is a race. I wouldn't say it's a marathon, it's a race. And like, have you got the mental stamina to do this? Well, whatever helps you relax.